Hello, everyone. Okay, that was great. And you know you are in for something even more exciting. We are still in this room on Friday afternoon, last day of the conference, after the super fun evening we have had, and it is to hear from one of the most remarkable organizers and speakers who I just had the chance to spend 30 minutes with. I feel like I could rewrite my entire introduction now. So I woke up early this morning thinking about what it means to be here, not just to learn from each other, but to fill our buckets too, to feel hope, to feel inspired, to gain that inspiration from each other, and to talk about people who are actually doing the work and winning their fights. Because there are fights being won, and we need that to push us forward. So we are so lucky to be hearing from our next speaker, someone who truly shows us what's possible when we put activism and organizing at the core of our work, so it becomes not just what we do, but who we are. While we are listening, I would like us to hold on to that possibility. Here in Ontario, we have spent the last 7 years fighting back against Doug Ford while he intentionally undermines, dismantles, defunds the things we value, like public education. It's unfortunately not an uncommon story in many of the provinces and cities and places where we live and work. It is getting harder and harder for everyone. Teachers, education workers, students, families, anyone fighting for the supports to just be and to be okay. And we feel the weight of leaders like Ford and others being reelected into a majority government in these times. That feeling of like we're doing this again. We are doing this again, and the piece of it that we are doing again is deep organizing, talking to people, having hard conversations, and mobilizing them, the kind of work that lasts beyond any election cycle. So there's no better time for us to be hearing from Stacy Davis Gates, and I am so honored to welcome her today. She is so cool. Wait till you see her suit. Stacy is not just the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, she is leading the charge in a very deep and serious fight for justice, beyond educational justice. Stacy is a former high school teacher. She fully stepped into her political voice when her own school was closed down. And now, under her leadership, the Chicago Teachers Union has transformed into one of the most influential progressive unions in North America. They are fighting on fair wages and better classrooms, but they're also fighting for affordable housing. They're fighting for racial justice and holding the core belief that everyone should be able to live here and have their needs met. Stacy reminds us that organizing isn't just about resistance, it is about vision. A vision of inclusive, thriving cities, of schools that nurture, not just neglect, where equity is our lived reality, not just a checkbox. Stacy doesn't just talk about solidarity, she builds it. She told me to ditch this whole thing. We are not just our work. But from walking picket lines in Chicago to standing shoulder to shoulder with community coalitions across the country and now here in Canada, she is showing what's possible, especially when working people come together, understanding that we all deserve better and you can demand more. You can demand more justice, more dignity, and more democracy. So please join me in giving the warmest welcome to an amazing educator, parent, advocate, real movement builder that we can all learn so much from, Stacy Davis Gates.
Well, good afternoon. Yeah, that was a nice welcome, a great introduction. I hear some Americans are still welcome in Canada, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So let me get right to it, because this is a room full of people who have to check their phones and hop on a Zoom for a moment and, just figure out what's going on without them. So I'll get to it. My name is Stacy Davis Gates. People ask me to come do things like this because they want to engage with the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. But if I bring my authentic self, I bring Hazel and Laura's granddaughter, two women who left the southern region of America, cotton fields, to migrate north to manifest me. And when I bring that person, I bring to you the story of hope and resilience. So the work that we do, the justice work, the human work that we all get to do, I bring that authenticity because this is difficult work. It is almost impossible work. And so when you engage in this work, you have to be very intentional about what the objective is and that it is long-term. It kinda, emphasis on kinda, it kinda helps you deal with it, the work, when it gets bad. Because it's bad right now. We have, every morning on IG, I'm looking at this picture of men in an El Salvadorian prison. Their heads are shaved. They are stripped of their clothing. And there are women in photo ops with them, a woman. It is a shame. And I'm thinking to myself, because I am a high school history teacher, how many more steps do we have? And will some of those steps be expedited? And who's the resistance? And how do we practice resilience in this moment? Who summons the courage? And who leads the charge? And so I want to submit to you that this is the room that has to take accountability for that, because we have to build a lot of rooms to take accountability for that. Whatever you're feeling about electoral work, get over it. And I'm going to talk to you about why you do have to get over it, because right now, real people depend on us to have answers, to have courage, to have coalition. And right now, you're in a room that is already coalition. Labor is in the room. Why are y'all so quiet? Labor's in the room. I hear community organizations are in the room. I hear elected officials are here. Yeah. Not sure if it's safe, right? I hear NGOs are in the room. I hear academics are in the room. I hear policymakers are in the room. And you're all in the crosshairs of those who seek to dehumanize us, because this coalition is what's going to save us. So I'm going to tell you a story. You know, I wrote this whole speech. I'm kidding. My communications guy did. And it's really good. It is. He takes a couple shots at Elon. You know, he mentions the occupant of, you know, the White House built by Black people on Pennsylvania Avenue. But I'll be doing none of that, apparently. Because when I was backstage, I was told that people needed to hear hope and possibility. So, Chicago, Illinois. It is really the ground zero for this confluence of neoliberal and right-wing policy. It is an unholy alliance that in Chicago was directed expressly for public education. So I'm going to talk to you about a system that closed schools on Black children on purpose in neighborhoods that have never had enough. It was inhumane. And it doubled down because in those schools, Black women like me made a choice to work, right? And we were then fired and pushed out of those places. So not only did you come from the most marginalized human beings, our young children, you also came for the worker class. So people like Paul Vallis and Rahm Emanuel and Arne Duncan closed like 200 schools, but they got permission to do it from a legislature that was Republican-led, right-wing. In fact, some of the testimony during the debate to give the mayor of Chicago unfettered control of the Chicago public schools was racist, like blatantly racist. And then a Republican governor signed the bill that became the law. And from 1995 to 2012, the behavior of this closing, of this consolidation, of this marginalization of that public good went unchecked, largely. It was the community groups that kept vigil, though. It was the community groups that understood the strategy and then the ensuing impacts. They continued to sound the alarm in ways in which once upon a time my union couldn't even hear. It couldn't. My school was closed in 2005. And Arne Duncan, you know him, he became the Secretary of Education under the first Black president, Barack Obama. He closed my school, don't clap, he closed my school. He said we were failing. But we were also in a neighborhood that Lorraine Hansberry, you know that woman, right? The playwright, literary genius, Southside Chicagoan, who grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood. A Raisin in the Sun is about that neighborhood that I got to teach in. Wow. So after families integrated the Inglewood neighborhood, Black families, the resources started to leave that neighborhood. And so you had this confluence of segregation, of poverty, of disinvestment, of racism, manifest in that school community because it was already planted in the neighborhood. And by 2005, Arne Duncan said he had enough, and he was closing us, and the kids would have to go elsewhere. Real interesting, right? To close a thing that is supposed to provide a public good in a place that had been robbed of those public goods. But remember the story of A Raisin in the Sun and the hope and the aspiration and the possibility that that gave that family. It's a theme here. They closed the school, and then they replaced it with other stuff. Some of it was privatized. Others were more marginal because they didn't want to educate all of the children in the neighborhood, just the ones that they thought they could educate without a lot of resources, right? Because if you have a complex life, it means you have complex needs. And it means if you have complex needs, that school community and those public institutions have to address those needs, and it costs money. And so if actual people who need those resources are getting those resources, it means that Elon Musk can't get them. See, I said it anyway. It means that Doge is a problem, right? It means that we already had Doge in Chicago. I'm coming back to this theme of hope and possibility. Doge closed 50 schools in 2013 at one time. One time, 50 schools. Some labor folks say 50 work sites. Community people say neighborhood centers, right? Researchers and academics say, oh my goodness, let's study this, right? And families said, what do I do next? And so this begins the hope and the possibility of the union that I belong to. In 2012, Karen Lewis, you all know something about that lady. She, Jesse Sharkey, Jackson Potter, Christine Maley, Michael Brunson, they take the city of Chicago on an awesome ride of strike. So before we can get to the actual injustice of the closing, we have to figure out how to find a voice to do it. Remember I told you, in 1995, the mayor of Chicago got control of the school system. By getting control of the school system, they began to make decisions. And these decisions don't come with any democracy, not a lot of accountability either, because like the mayor of Chicago. So it's just happening. Schools are closing, children are being displaced, children are getting lost in the system, children are being pointed towards the school-to-prison pipeline. In fact, during that time, the Chicago Public Schools had a very auspicious statistic. It was the one place in the country that suspended and expelled disproportionately more Black children than any other school district. So listen to what I'm saying, mayoral control, a marginalization of the opportunities through the actual school community, cutting of the workforce, which was also Black and middle class. These are the people who hold the anchors, because I told you Chicago is segregated. So everybody in my neighborhood look like me, whether they are middle class or not. So our neighborhoods are also being marginalized. Remember, schools stand empty. What does that do to property values? So you have this wholesale assault, and they're selling it to us in the language of the civil rights movement. It is an injustice for Black children to be regulated to dropout factories. They are foreclosing on their future, and then you get things like No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top policymakers. You get laws all across this country that marginalize the public good, that privatize that good, and then marginalize it some more until it's closed or so narrow that the vast majority of children don't even get an opportunity to participate. That's what's happening in Chicago with schools. Not with housing, not with health care, schools. You have to be some type of monster to zero in on children and create policies that you know will harm them. So I would like to get up here and tell you that our labor union made a choice to do this, but our labor union had no other choice but to do this. See what I'm saying? Hope and possibility. It isn't always that dream that civil rights leaders get caricatured for, but it is survival that most often triggers a behavior that is both courageous, bold, and unapologetic. That's how you get our union. We didn't have a choice. And because we didn't have a choice, and because if you don't have a choice, it also means you ain't got too much to lose either. So what are you holding on to? Well, you're holding on to hope and possibility. The hope that Black children, brown children, immigrant children, working class children, all children in the city of Chicago can get the schools that they deserve. That's the hope. And the possibility is only available to us when we clarify who we're doing it for. Intention. What is our intention? Well, ours was survival, but some of us, because we're like actual teachers and stuff, we care about like what happens to the young people, right? Because these are the people that we get to engage with every day. It's not a workplace only. It is really a place where you connect and you engage, you form, you storm, you create. It is like a living organism, these schools. And you see so many beautiful people like Louise Robinson, who lost her mother at an early age and whose dad wasn't present, but her grandmother was her anchor. But her grandmother, of course, couldn't keep up with everything, and so Louise fell behind. But it was the public school and the opportunity to attend the school and have a program that created a safe space for her and that was small enough to like support her. Louise is now a social worker, right? The possibility. And so your intention is to have more Louises. So our union forms this iteration of leadership from Karen Lewis to Jesse Sharkey to now Stacy Davis Gates. We form because we didn't have a choice to form. But we also understood that we couldn't do it together alone. We had to do it with, because it's Chicago. It is 2025, and I just told you I lived in a segregated neighborhood, and no one even flinched. Shame. I do. I am raising my children in one of the most segregated cities in this world. And that segregation allows the disparities to mushroom because it is hidden from those who would be compelled otherwise. So what the Chicago Teachers Union had to do was figure out how to connect with those who were already keeping vigil. Dyett High School is a Black high school in the Washington Park neighborhood, South Side. Washington Park is a beautiful park, right? If Chicago had won the Olympics, they would have destroyed its beauty, and you would have known more about it. But at any rate, Dyett High School, this is the story that I'm going to tell you. Our union fought very hard in 2013 to stop Rahm Emanuel from closing 50 schools. He started with like this really big list of over 100 schools that he was going to close, and then he allowed people to believe he only closed 50 because he was benevolent. You know, they performed this Hunger Games trial run where people would go from meeting to meeting, begging, crying, pleading for their schools to be spared from closing. Think about that. So he closes these 50 schools in 2013. Karen Lewis didn't know what to say the next day because I was in the meeting. She had to say something. So it was decided that she would say, we have to change the political landscape in order to preserve and save our schools. In order to preserve and save the public good in Chicago, we would have to change the political landscape. People mistook that Karen Lewis wanted to only be electoral. No, Karen Lewis, as a labor leader, understood that the mayor of Chicago was our boss. We were under mayoral control. And so that in order to effectuate the right type of change in our workplaces, schools, we had to contest the boss. So we contested the boss and his cronies through elections. We did, and we lost a whole bunch of them. And it was okay, because what we were doing was shifting the electorate. Changing the political landscape doesn't mean you win. It means you organize people to a vision of the type of society and spaces that you want to occupy. See the difference? Intention. The intention is not to put someone in a place that may vote with you somehow. The intention is to organize the electorate to have an expectation of a thing that you can hold that person accountable for. See the difference? One is more powerful. So we did that. We lost a lot, but what we gained was the trust, the engagement of an electorate who now believed that schools needed the resources, that they shouldn't be closed, believed that educators were not their enemy, and that the union might be a decent, upstanding space, right? But we didn't do that as a public relations campaign. We got into fights. We got into fights with powerful Democrats and powerful Republicans. Listen to what I'm saying. The only sacred cow are those children because we built intention first. So everybody got some. The boss got it, elected officials received it. And in coalition, we created opportunities to struggle together on the things that we were in solidarity about. Make no mistake, coalition work is crazy work. It is. That's why people don't like to do it. There's a reason why so few exist. And the only way that we keep us free and we take care of each other is through coalition. There is literally no other way. Applause line. And that's your call to action, is that in this space, this is not theoretical. It is literally the only way, trust me. And it is hard, and it is bruising, and it is a whole bunch of things, and it is the only way. Intention. So we formed this coalition, and getting back to the community groups that were keeping vigil, it was a whole tapestry of community groups from the north side to the south side to the west side, fighting the privatization, fighting the closings of their schools, the marginalizations, the consolidations. And so we meet up with some of them. Diet High School. The Kenwood Oakland Community Organization was where Reverend Jackson, Jesse Jackson, first stopped in Chicago. It wasn't PUSH. It wasn't the Rainbow Coalition. It was COCO first, right? Little known facts, history teacher. And this organization is one of the hardest coalition partners at the table because they don't believe you, because they have no reason to, because there's no data or evidence to ever believe anything except for they're gonna be Black and they're gonna die. Because everything else shifts, it oppresses, it chokes off power and opportunity. And members went on a hunger strike with these people for 34 days to save a high school, Diet High School. And they went on a hunger strike with them because through the struggle, we figured out that coalition would be the only way. And then if you're in coalition with the community group, you got to figure out what their strike is. So many times community groups come join us on the picket line. They know what that strike is, right? But what is their strike? What does labor, what do policymakers, what do electeds, what do researchers give the community? Well, 3 of our members gave their bodies. They gave their bodies to save a school that had already been closed. At the time of it being closed, 13 kids. They were taking physical education online. How? How? 13 students, and there was a 34-day hunger strike. The school is open. Hope. Hope in action. And it's open as a sustainable community school. Because after the strike, our union took that school and others to the negotiating table. And we bargained for it to be a community sustainable school. Excuse me, a sustainable community school. I was like, that didn't sound right. It gets more resources, human and financial. They just celebrated the first state championship boys basketball team this past winter. They have artists and residents at this school now. And they build all these pretty mosaics throughout their facility. Parents and community members, the people who went on a hunger strike, they have agency in that school because it's a community school. The lead organizer, G2 Brown, is a member of the Chicago Board of Education that he helped move from a hunger strike to an elected board and now to a board member. So you heard what I just said there. G2 Brown organized the hunger strike. Then he worked as an organizer to get the General Assembly to give us an elected school board so decisions like the one that was made about diet would have a democratic process. He won that, and then he got elected to be that. See, in order to have possibility, you got to do some work. Organizing is at the center of it, and in coalition with others. This room is the coalition. What are you going to organize? Who do you intend to benefit? What are the possibilities of this coalition? Is it in winning and expanding democracy in the 21st century where it is under severe attack? Is it participating in an electoral contest that you help to anchor with the people you've struggled with? Is it going on strike in order to win the community schools that can be sustained and stabilized in neighborhoods for the children you intend for this to work? Is it staying militant and unopposed, loving people and working for them? It's all of those things, you all. Do all of those things in your silence. Do those things in the street, messiness, crazy of coalition. I challenge you, whatever the thing is, and things that you can create. Your sound just like the ones I listen to. Terrible. And that's our, because everything that you are experiencing here is everything that we are experiencing in Chicago. And for us to be some of the smartest, most righteous organizers and thinkers and doers, why aren't we thinking, organizing, and researching and doing all across this world? This can no longer be about the Elons or the Trumps. It has to be about how working families are anchored in the ethic of transformation. We elected a mayor from our ranks. One of those hunger strikers is a mayor too. Be intentional about your liberation and about mine too. Thank you so much.